My name is Eileen Lowry. I lead our Blockchain Garage for the world, which is a fun task. I get to help clients solve their business network problems day in and day out, and also build blockchain applications with my team of architects and developers based here in New York. What is IBM doing around blockchain? And I want to really emphasize the fact that this is really a broad opportunity across a lot of the industries where actually at the end of the day, a lot of these networks come together. And IBM is really focused on bringing enterprises, startups, developers come together to help them start their journey, accelerate their journey, and really extend their journey when it comes to blockchain. You've heard a lot of the speakers before me talk about different participants, a lot of different players in these streams of information, and that's true. And the concept of a network is really important, and so bringing together those ecosystems is an area in which IBM is highly focused. But as I said, we're focused on really helping all types of clients on their journey, and at the same time, we're highly focused at the bottom of the stack and contributing to the open source, Hyperledger specifically, and seeing that advance such that we can build on top of that, take advantage of the open source, the openly governed components of Hyperledger, and build on top of that and differentiate using our IBM Cloud, in which we have our platform to help it make it that much easier for developers, enterprises, startups to deploy their blockchain applications. On top of that, we are highly focused on building and solving business problems for clients. And so we've built several solutions. You may have heard about our work in IBM in the food trust and safety area with our solution, IBM Food Trust. We've also really been highly focused in the supply chain space. You heard before from Mike around showing just the sheer number of players that are involved in showing an ad. And when you think about that in the grand scale of many different industries, shipping a good from one place to the other, actually moving a good, all of that entails a supply chain. And so our joint venture with Maersk around global trade is an important area for us. All of this gets wrapped around the concept of ecosystem and services. The fact that you're having to interact with other players and needing to think about who are all those other players, and at the same time helping clients to really build that solution, figure out what is the business value, and derive that business solution with you. We're here to talk about AdTech, but AdTech and any industry actually intersects. We heard about payments. Payments from a financial institution, what actually had to happen to settle that ad? You had to exchange money. And so where a lot of this has derived from is the financial services, except for blockchain is applicable to many other industries. There's a lot of skeptics out there as far as, is blockchain for everything? And you heard some of the comments early when we started off with Ben of, there's a lot of hype. Is it real? It's real, right? I will stand in that camp and say it's real because we've worked with over 400 clients to make blockchain real for their businesses. And it does actually span a spectrum of industries. Does it mean it's applicable to everything and anything from a business problem standpoint? No, you do need to look at, what is it that we're trying to solve, and is blockchain applicable? Are we digitizing processes with friction amongst players? Are we having to help from a non-linear perspective bring together new players? Or can we actually think about a new business model itself? But I wanted to show this off just that you can get the wheels turning and thinking of, yes, we're here about advertising, but how does advertising tie into other industries such that when this becomes even further in the life cycle of blockchain into networks connecting with one another, that you can start to think about how some of these networks might connect with one another given the use cases and the business problems that we're looking to solve. We started off the talk tonight talking about different aspects of blockchain. You heard a fair amount about public blockchains and different protocols. IBM is focused on private permissioned blockchains. And from that vantage point and working with our clients, there's 4 main tenets to a blockchain for business to really instill that trust within a network. The most obvious piece of that is the shared ledger, that shared replicated information across the different participants in the network. Smart contracts, you've heard this term quite a lot. At the end of the day, this is that business logic that needs to be validated and therefore executed to conduct a transaction and add, that transaction to the blockchain. I'm going to talk about privacy in a little bit more depth, but at the end of the day, when you are transacting in a network focused on business interactions, you need to have that appropriate visibility across the players. You heard from Dan talking about how he has different clients, sharing different information with them, but they might not have that same visibility across all of those different participants in the network because of the things that you heard from Mike around different rates and fees and so forth. And of course, proof. You heard some of the terms around proof of work and mining. In a blockchain for business, you don't necessarily need that. You don't need that compute power of computers running in a dark back office trying to mine for information. There's means in which you can actually get the relevant participants to agree and endorse a transaction, such that now you just have a matter of ordering and how did those transactions occur and when did they occur in what order. So I'm going to go from this very high-level view, and because we have a very mixed audience, I get the pleasure of showing an architecture chart in one chart right after this. So get ready to go much deeper. In the matter of like 2 minutes, we're going to go really deep into architecture. So privacy, which is what you saw, I circled on the last chart, is really about providing that privacy and confidentiality between the subset of participants. When you're talking about Bitcoin and being in an anonymous network where everybody can see everything, that's great for the purpose of what that network might be for. But when you're talking about businesses that may have strategies that they need to protect or that they want to protect, but there is information that is crucial for them to share in order to move goods faster, to actually break down the barriers of what an ad actually costs and was it placed, that having that right privacy and confidentiality is very important. Blockchain is actually taking advantage of many other technologies to do that. So in our case, cryptography is essential, and it's central to the process of actually executing that transaction and ensuring that the right people have the ability to see and execute upon that. So bearing that in mind, the really geeky chart here from a Hyperledger perspective. This is the overarching architecture for Hyperledger. And what I want to focus on is just the privacy piece of that and where it's relevant for some of the examples that you heard from today already. Imagine on this side of the chart, right? This is a front-end application. Maybe you are trying to check how your campaign from an ad perspective is doing, and you've got an interface then to the blockchain itself. These O's here is called an ordering service. When you execute a transaction, you heard from Ben earlier, there's this validation that happens. The validation is happening between different entities on this side of the chart, but really at the end, after something is actually validated, you want to order those transactions. How did they occur? Did they occur 1, 3, 2 or 1, 2, 3? So that's what this piece of the architecture chart is really trying to demonstrate. And what happens is then you've got a bunch of different entities, we'll call them here endorsing peers, that have a copy of that shared ledger, and they are executing and validating those transactions that need to occur and then get pushed into the ordering service itself, such that then that's going to order those transactions. You have something else here called a committer peer. A committer has a copy of that ledger as well, so they understand what's going on. They've got information as it's shared across the different shared ledgers here, but they don't necessarily have the ability to actually validate anything. So they can consume information, but they're not writing and executing on those transactions themselves. On a couple charts ago, I talked about smart contracts. In Hyperledger Fabric, the term is called chain code, really just, again, that business logic that's going to get executed by those endorsing peers, and in which all of that information is ordered and then shared across all of the different types of nodes, endorsers, and committers. So what does this all mean when it comes to privacy? Take a very simple network example. You could imagine that this is one brand, and this is one agent publisher. So you have maybe another network organization here that might be the actual agency itself. So we've got different organizations. They're all transacting with one another. How do they know? How do they keep things private if you've got two brands? Say you've got Nike and Adidas, and they don't necessarily need to know, again, the rates that were used or the fees that are being executed on, taken from the various elements of that chain. So they might have what's called channels, two different channels with that same agency and publisher throughout that chain. So what actually would end up happening is they have private information that gets shared between these different channels. Think of them like radio stations. You're tuned in and you're allowed to listen. So in this case, Y and Z, you can see the smart contracts are visible and executable by these two entities that are talking to one another. And at the same point in time, you've got this entity and that entity that are able to actually transact with one another and communicate, but they can't see and execute on the other information. So again, Nike might be conducting, placing its ads, and you've got an agency on their behalf working with a publisher, and they're able to transact on that information, but they don't see the rates and the fees that maybe Adidas has. So they're still allowed to have those trade secrets, the competitive nature with those different agencies. You can imagine how this expands out into many other brands, and you saw it even on Dan's chart of he had the different verticals of where you have that privacy. But very important piece of transacting from a blockchain standpoint, because we know that you have trade secrets, you have strategies that give you that competitive advantage, and channels is the means by which you can actually provide that privacy and have those sub-ledgers of information that gets shared across the different participants in a network. So we went from really high level to understanding a little bit about privacy to really deep into Hyperledger architecture and the means by which we take advantage of privacy. And now I want to bring it up a level and just end on the note of how can you get hands-on and actually try out this technology. It's very simple. Go to developer.ibm.com/blockchain. You can go there, spin up a blockchain network in a few clicks. Just this week and into next week, you're going to see our starter plan out there on our website so that you can go for free for 30 days. Try it out. If you want to increase and add more organizations to your network, you can move on to the enterprise plan. But basically, you can go and spin up a network, start experimenting. There's samples out there to help you understand the technology and help you understand how to actually build and grow a network. Read up on the documentations, on the documents. Dan talked about Hyperledger Fabric and Hyperledger Composer. Composer is an abstraction layer above Hyperledger Fabric that lets you build applications much faster. That's integrated here in the IBM Blockchain Starter Plan. So you can just very quickly spin it up, use the samples that are from the Composer site. And at the same time, last but not least, have fun. I do, like I said, believe that blockchain is real, it's here, it's now, and you can change your everyday life with this technology. So thank you.